Good evening, everybody. It's see, what time is it? Oh, it's 9:30. It's 9:30 on the East Coast, and then on the West Coast, it's 6:30.
Yep.
Um, Welcome to the weekly Calamity Jane live stream. I'm taking my time with the intro. I'm going for a dramatic shift. Like
Yeah, no, it's good.
almost a Walkenian.
Yeah, yeah,
Unnecessary pause.
that's cool. I like it. I like this different take.
Yes, yes, indeed. How's it going, James?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there. Another week working, working, working.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
Uh, So, I mean, we can pretty much get right into it for this week and just talk about whatever as we normally do. I will going to share screen mode,
Okay.
and there's not even any drama there anymore. It's
There.
just
Well, if you were watching, there was because I actually forgot, and like
oh
I actually shared it a frame before you attempted to share your screen.
wow.
So
Okay,
and I wasn't
that
gonna lie to
was
you. I couldn't lie. I'm just gonna come clean. There was a little bit of drama there.
oh well. No one knew until you said something.
Well, everybody who watched knew because it pops up on the screen. It goes, "Do you want to extend the permissions?" So
Oh, yeah,
you are
sorry.
the
So
literally
here's,
the only person who wouldn't have known.
yeah, I wouldn't know. Yeah, it's a joke for everybody except for me. I'm the
That's
one
right. That's
on the
right.
outside.
All right.
Um,
I see a geometric shape that vaguely resembles tinsel on my
yes,
screen.
yes. This is the blocked out version I did from a couple weeks ago. Last week, if you recall, I started sculpting Tinsel's head. And at the end of our stream, after we signed off, I wasn't happy with it, so I just threw it in the garbage, in the recycle slash garbage, the digital garbage Windows 10 has, and it's gone
Yep.
forever.
Yep.
Um, I'm going to attempt to do it again tonight.
Okay.
I want to make sure that first, some characters I'm a lot more freewheeling with them, and I don't try to get too precious with it. But with Tinsel, I feel like she needs to be done. She needs to feel right for me
Mm-hmm.
to proceed. So last week was kind of a wash. It was good exercise to kind of get a feel for some things, but the final product just wasn't there. So I'm gonna go ahead and start doing that again tonight. I'm gonna this is our base again for Tinsel here. I'm gonna hide this and start with just her head again tonight, and then see what happens. That's the idea.
Well, there's an interesting uh, um, aphorism in improv that I've heard various versions of from various teachers.
Hmm.
And it's the only difference between an amateur improviser and a professional improviser is the number of bad scenes they've done. And I think, I think that's very applicable to one of my other favorite, well, not an aphorism, but it's more of a cliche or a saying or an idiom or what have you. And it's the joke. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, right? Uh,
Okay, that's
um,
interesting.
yeah, I love it. I think it's hilarious, but I use it all the time. Um, and that was just a roundabout way of saying like the number of ideas that I have thrown the actual product away, but then retained the lessons that I learned from it are innumerable. Because for me, and I mean not just for me, I think for everybody, oftentimes there is uh, more to be gained from failure than there is from getting something right.
Yep. I can hear that. I mean, as long as you're learning something from the failure, um, it's a win.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and Lord knows how many times I fail doodling and doing other stuff like that. So it's like, it's whatever. I mean, I've been here, done that. I'm not, uh, I'm not going to get too obsessed with it. And like I said, nothing's too precious. So I'm just trying to uh,
So I
learn my
noticed,
way.
are you doing a high res model like the
No,
virtual clay thing? Or are you actually just modeling using primitives right now?
I am modeling using primitives right now, kind of on purpose because I just want to. Again, I'm going to try to block in her shape for her head tonight,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll go into sculpting mode once I have shapes that need some details. But you know, I know that we have our sketch here. Um, there's some details here that are done with line, but again, with the way our show is put together, everything's done with flat colors and shapes. So the geometry doesn't need to be as detailed. It's a lot more forgiving,
Yeah.
going flat shaded. Um, so with that in mind, I thought, I'm not going to go with sculptural stuff just yet. I'm going to try to get her just blocked in enough, and we'll see what happens after that. Um, so that's my intention for right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that's the deal.
All right. I love it. I love it. Um, and so you're literally just tweaking edges and vertices right now.
Yes, yeah. Like right now, so I'm in Blender. There's a couple of different. I'm in edit mode right now,
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, and so there's three ways to edit your vertices, or your edges, or the actual polygon. So right now I'm in edge mode. There's two other options I could do. I could actually pick an edge and move that around and highlight it that way, do it that way, or I can actually take a whole plane and just edit it that way. So for now, I mean, it just kind of becomes just whatever you feel like.
You're doing
I
it.
just have,
You're doing individual point manipulation right now.
yeah, I'm just doing an individual for right now, but I could easily do it with Edge too, and stuff like that as well. But I'm not too. Again, I'm trying to break this thing a little bit first, and then once I understand where I can fix some things, then I'll start tweaking stuff some more.
Where do you feel you're at? I mean, I can answer the question, but I'm curious. Um, how do you think you've developed? And now, admittedly, you've only been playing with this for a relatively short time.
Hmm.
But do you feel yourself more adept or comfortable with the tool than you used to be?
Yeah, but not nearly as comfortable as I would say drawing,
Mm-hmm.
as a tool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I am getting more comfortable. It's catching up a little bit. The main goal, and I don't know if I'll ever get there, but I'll spend what I can trying to get there. But I want to get to a point where I can sketch and do stuff not as fast, because no matter what, moving vertices around and polygons is always a little bit slower versus just drawing a line.
Sure.
But I do want to get to a point where I can express an idea just as fast uh, in 3D space as I can drawing. But
Mm-hmm.
again, that's more of a idealistic point of view at this point, and I'm not there yet. So I've got to be patient, and I've got to just kind of soldier on and try to do the best I can.
That's
Um,
always the hardest part about learning a new tool. I know, I remember when I was learning to play bass, and I'm by no stretch of the imagination a virtuoso. I just want to
mhm.
preface what I say here. But um, one of the hardest parts for me when I was learning to play the instrument was being okay with being bad.
Yeah.
It's
Hmm.
and I can only speak for myself here. I don't know um, what your sense is, but I the hardest part for me was like going. It's okay that I'm not good at this. um,
Yeah, yeah. I try to get to that point too, and I try to get some resolution that way as well. But it doesn't always, I am pretty competitive with myself, I guess. So I do get kind of angry, and then sometimes I have to step away, and then focus on something else. And that's the beauty of working on a animated cartoon show. There's always something else to jump onto if I get too caught up on something.
mm-hmm,
We have plenty of backgrounds to work on. There's other characters that needs to be worked on, but I am focused on Tinsel tonight, just because I just want to kind of figure her out,
mm-hmm.
um, and go from there, and at least get more of a sense of her. But so far tonight, I mean, it's going kind of slow, versus when I was sculpting last week. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking baby steps. It feels like right now with this, but it's okay. I'll keep on trucking for a little bit.
So you say that you're going slow. Is that coming from a standpoint? Is that a technical reason, or is there a creative reason, like seeing what you want in your head, kind of thing?
Um, I think it's knowledge of the tool, and then where I want to go with it. Well, like last week, it felt like I was flying, but then I had to struggle with the tool because it was too, uh, for lack of better, meshy. It felt like there's too many little dots everywhere, and
Mm,
it felt kind of chaotic. This time, it's really blocky, but I'm not going too crazy with it, but it's not going fast enough to what I want it to be, where I wanted to be, like I was last week. Um, so, I mean, I may just actually like already this one. I'm not as happy. I mean, I tried a couple of tests with her already. Let me see. I'm gonna probably throw that out. I think
okay.
yes. Nothing's precious here, so no, I will not save.
Yeah. No, the number of times like I'll start a story. Now I don't actually delete. I for me my writing directory is just filled with half finished stories that I've abandoned because I didn't like them. But I don't
Mm-hmm.
delete them because every once in a blue moon, it's rare, but every once in a blue moon, I'll remember something that I wrote in an abandoned story that I like, and then being able to go back to it and just copy and paste instead
Yeah,
of having to rewrite it is
yeah,
useful. But
yeah.
yeah, my personal writing directory is littered with the corpses of abandoned stories.
Yeah, I have so many. I mean, on the flip side, I mean, as far as drawings, I have plenty of garbage drawings all over the place, that I just, they don't take up any space. I mean, these days with digital, you don't have to worry about it too much.
Right, exactly, exactly.
So that part's good. But
So this is a different interpretation or a
yeah,
different
yeah, this is
experiment.
different. This is a different version of her.
Uh huh.
This one felt a little better actually. When I started drawing her.
Yeah.
Let me go into edit mode a little bit. I'll play with this one a little bit just to see. Um,
I noticed that this one is more swept down. I can see
yeah.
the space where the wheel would go a little bit more. Um, the other
Yes.
the one that
Exactly.
you started the evening with looked more like a shield rather than
Hmm.
a head.
Yeah. The idea was going to be that shield was going to be I was going to rotate it and then start doing this type of thing to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I just like the shape of this one a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
so I thought I'd just bring it out of the archives and then play with it a little bit.
There you
Um,
go. There you go.
so
No, I agree with you. But in terms of, I'm agreeing with an implication that I am foisting upon you
uh-huh.
that one of the, if not the most important aspect of tinsel is her skull head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I think we're in agreement there. But my question is, being that it's the, and this isn't a loaded question.
Hmm.
It's a genuine question.
Hmm.
Given that it is the most complex part of her, is there any value in doing the other aspects of her, like her saddle or her wheels or her fuel tank or something like that, um, first? So tackle a slightly lower challenge, or does doing the more complex piece inform the overall look of the rest of the bike?
Um, if we were to, I have to, if I jump back, I can't really jump. I mean, I have to open up another iteration of Blender, so I'm not gonna bother with that.
Oh
But
no, it's fine.
if we were to refer back to that blocky version of Tinsel earlier in our
Yeah.
stream, um, a lot of like the tires are kind of done. Like I don't have to do much with that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I can add some subtle details I'm going to do, but the general flat shading will take care of any need for details. Um, the basic thing for the only thing really left that's going to be semi complex is her fuselage, her main hub where her engine sits.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be the most. That would be the second most complex thing. And in my head, I have it. I have that in my head too, as how I'm going to model that. But the language I need to use, well, the tool sets I need to use to do that, I'd have to kind of learn them a little bit and then play with them a little bit. And I don't want to futz around with pushing with certain tools that I want to do until I get more familiar with them
Mm-hmm.
to make that fuselage.
Okay.
So in a way, it's actually simpler to make, but because in my head it's already sort of solved and I kind of know what to do, I'm not worrying with that. Like whereas with Tissel's head, I do want to worry about it because I want to solve this issue because this is the more complex issue of her character
Hmm.
right now. So yeah, if that helps. I don't know
No,
if that answers
I
that or
understand.
not.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. Yeah,
Um,
I asked because this is something that I'm trying to do. Um, I've always been, when I write, I tend to write in order,
okay.
meaning beginning to end, right?
So you go in a linear way. You don't jump to the end and have the ending all planned out.
Now, there are a
You
few stories that I've like the last two paragraphs of the story come into my head, and then the challenge is like, how do I get to those last two paragraphs?
uh-huh.
But most of the time, when I write, I'll have an idea or have a an emotion or a thought I want to express in the form of a story. Right? Sometimes it's not even an idea.
Hmm.
Um, it's the glimmer in the mind's eye of an idea kind of thing. I don't know.
Hmm.
That was awful. But
No, I think it. Yeah, you're just trying to get it, trying to speak to it. I get it.
right, and so you have a starting point that you kind of play around with, and you try to work forward from there. And I think that that's one of the reasons why so many of my stories wind up in the dustbin. Um, and recently, I've been thinking, well, what if I like start in the middle of the story, right?
Okay.
What
Hmm.
if I start halfway through the story and all the action is already happening, and then I can work backwards from there, right?
Hmm.
Right in media res, as opposed
Hmm.
to writing linearly. Um, and I'm just curious, and I think that was the reason why I brought up the tinsel thing. Um, if that was something that if there's a comparison or a similar philosophy that you find yourself employing when you're making art of any form, not necessarily 3D.
Um, I think with writing, there's much more. It's hard to say because with drawing for me, once you put the line down, then it's linear. You're building from that.
I
You have no
see.
choice. You have to just pick. You put one line down. You start with one cube. You start modeling it, and there's nothing. Way to start in the middle of that. You have to
Mm-hmm.
just start with. Yeah, it's the basic building block. That one line starts everything.
That's
But
interesting.
in writing, it's conceptual. It's in your head, and you can
Right.
decide wherever you want to put your line down to start. Once you do, then you're good. But
Yeah. Then
I
you're
mean,
sort of
that's
yeah.
where But here's where similarities do happen because you know I put a quote unquote line down for tinsel as a general character. I put all the shapes down, so that could be considered a beginning, middle, and end, sort of in a
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
writing term because my beginning is the head. I'm starting on it and doing it, but I could jump over to the fuselage,
Right.
and that's the
Right.
middle of a book, right? That's
Right.
if there's any kind of weird metaphor, that's the only thing I could probably.
Well,
I,
I'm very interested in the parallels between art. I find the creative process, regardless of whether or not you're a sculptor or a painter or a writer or a director or whatever, when I talk to artists, I find that even if we are working in fundamentally different mediums, there are oftentimes more similarities than not in terms of the craft.
mhm.
So it's a matter of how we express the stories we're telling ourselves in our heads. The medium changes. But I personally find that all artists are basically trying to get these thoughts that are in their head out in a
Mhm.
healthy way, right?
Mhm.
Um, so, yeah, I was just sort of thinking about that. I know
So
for instance with Calamity Jane, um, what I've written always came from um, well the second episode at least because that was the first episode written with Calamity Jane as the protagonist. The pilot actually started as a Leon episode, and when we changed to Calamity, we retrofitted some of the storyline from the original, so it wasn't like a clean slate, right? Um, but in thinking about writing it originally for Leon, it was sort of a well, we're writing a pilot, so we need to establish all the characters, we need to establish the setting, we need to establish the themes, that kind of stuff. And so I was actually more concerned with the moment to moment bits, like how does Calamity ultimately interact with Mitchell versus some deep subtext for the plot. The pilot episode is dealing with a bunch of menacing creatures with no line of dialogue or no subtext or pathos because it was simpler that way, right? It allowed us to focus on the important characters, and let the escalation of the tension be more visceral, right? Because her foe is just a monster as opposed to a plotting kind of character.
Mm.
So, yeah.
When you so did you feel like you had to plug in Calamity for episode one, or did you feel like it kind of? I'm trying to think about like I'm trying to recall now how the dialogue like Mitchell in the bar kind of treats Calamity the same as Leon as he would have with Leon, right? So there's that, but I'm just wondering like what your thoughts on that are like
Well,
how
it's
much.
interesting. Yeah, yeah. It's a little of column A, a little of column B.
Mhm.
So because Leon was relatively stoic in the original draft, the characters of Dry Gulp Gorge actually tended to drive the narrative a little bit more.
Uh-huh.
Um, and what I found when I went back with Calamity, what ended up happening is I actually had to quiet the other characters. I'm just trying to find the right words here to give Calamity more of an opportunity to speak. Right,
Hmm.
Leon
Hmm.
wasn't really in a hurry to speak in the original pilot,
Hmm.
but Calamity is a lot more chatty, and so rewriting it to give her the opportunity to breathe a little bit was actually the hardest part. Was removing dialogue from the other characters as opposed to adding
Oh,
in
okay.
dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, the initial scene got completely rewritten, and other than the setting of a campfire, how that scene plays out, the setting of a campfire and a warhog, everything else about that scene is completely rewritten.
Hmm.
Um, I also, um, the relationship, and we've talked about this on the stream before. The relationship between Mitchell and Calamity um, versus Mitchell and Leon is a very, very different relationship because of how different Calamity and Leon are from each other.
Hmm.
But everybody else, generally speaking, their interactions with Calamity for the pilot are pretty similar to the original draft.
Hmm.
So here you go, a little bit of insider insider.
Inside of the writers' room type of
Yeah,
stuff.
a little bit of the inside of the one man writer's room. But then by
Um.
the time we get to the second episode,
Mhm.
and we know who Calamity is, we know that she's the star, and we've established these characters, and then it was I actually had a first scene in mind, and I the entire episode unraveled from the inspiration point of that first scene
Of episode two.
of episode two. Yeah,
So now, oh yeah, that's right. That yeah, I can see that. With which yeah, with the original
yeah. I
script,
feel like we're
however many.
dancing a little bit here because we're not we're
Yeah,
not talking at all about episode two yet. But
no, no, yeah, but I hear you. Okay, I was like thinking, wait a second. Episode two is always this way. No, no, it's not.
no, no, no. The original episode that this is very, very loosely inspired on that featured Leon. Other than the antagonist for the episode, there's nothing similar anymore.
No, it's so different. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's very true.
all we did was keep the character, and frankly, the character is even different and stronger,
Yeah,
honestly, because this character has Calamity as an antagonist now.
yeah, um, yeah. It's crazy how. that did change the arc of that episode. But it's great. I'm really happy with episode 2. I mean, eventually we'll get there.
Hey,
Well,
you know,
right now I'm still on episode 1, but
the
someday
yeah,
we'd like to get there.
another idiom or whatever cliche. The
Yeah.
journey of 1,000 miles starts with but a single step.
Well, we've done. I feel like I've done thousands and thousands of steps. I don't
Yeah.
know
Well,
how
a
many
thousand
steps.
steps probably isn't even a mile, so.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Okay. So yeah, so I have plenty more to go then.
Oh yeah.
That's,
Oh yeah.
so, yeah.
Um, but yeah, so yeah, it's just I for some reason I have a little bit of just writing theory on the brain tonight, and just exploration on parallels with what your creative process is like. I think is what was coming out here.
Well, as you see with my creative process tonight, I started with going blocky, and I just couldn't handle it. I just
Mm-hmm.
wasn't happy. And I'm already happier in sculpt mode already. I mean, I'm just I'm making the shape I want to make.
Mm-hmm.
It's not perfect, but it's closer to what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I may have to just bite the bullet and just stick with sculpting per head, and then I'll go with the general geometry stuff later.
I mean, you can use that as a you can take the initial sculpt of the head and then go, okay, well, I know where the key points of the geometry are, and then
Yeah,
I guess you could build a lower poly version once you have the general sense of the shape and the high res.
yeah. Um, and again, she might be the most high res thing if we ever went in any 3D scene. She might be the most high res thing anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And again, one thing that's kind of fun about um, Blender is well with their sculpt option is okay. Let me turn on my wireframe first. So this is a pretty dense wireframe already for how simple it is of an object. But I mean, I can go back in and let me see that. I hope I don't crash Blender, but it's okay. We're just way early. But if I was to remesh this, let me see. I have this voxel size at 0.3, 0.03 remesh, and it kind of does that. Okay, so I can kind of play with it and make the boxes bigger
Mm-hmm.
and get the yeah. See, now it's a little bit more simpler to look. I mean, geometry is much more simpler. And
But I
get
feel like that would be like a last step kind of thing, right?
yes,
Like
yeah,
you go ahead and sculpt at the highest resolution because who cares? And
and then you
then
can go back in. But then, like once you, but what I found though is if I do sculpt at a high resolution, first of all, it does take more processing power, and second,
oh, that's
some
true.
subtle details I spend time on, and if I remesh everything, you lose those details. So like, I just waste my time
Oh, it's
making
interesting.
details at all.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's about finding that balance. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. So this episode, I mean, I know we're coming up against the clock. This particular stream wasn't the most. I mean, compared to what we were last week, I feel like I got farther along last week with her, but I had to kind of, like I said, I'm exercising some software demons by, is this really the direction I want to go? I mean, I'm just having that conversation a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
and
I
again, it's
think.
only because it's tinsel. It wouldn't matter if it was anybody, if there's any other character, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because it's tinsel, I do want it to be extra special.
Well, it's. I mean, I'm full of cliches tonight, but it's sort of measure twice, cut once, right? Do
Yeah,
the legwork up front and be completely happy with it now, rather than getting halfway through something and deciding, you know what, I don't like this.
yeah, yeah.
Um, you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So I think
Exactly.
spending the time to experiment and throw stuff away if you need to, because why not?
Yeah,
It's not wasted time, right? Because the end result will be better because you'll know what you want. You'll have a better sense of what you're looking for, of what you want,
yeah, yeah. That's 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 the fun because we have an unlimited budget, which is just time.
which is
So,
time. Yeah, yeah.
so I get to kind of play with it a little bit farther and push it. But that's definitely what I've been doing with Tinsel since we've been revisiting her. Um, yeah.
Well, I think that that's a pretty good. I mean, I think we had a pretty scintillating conversation about the creative process in general tonight,
Hmm.
um, and I think that that's fine. I don't know how you feel. A lot of times, I feel like the our stream is what you're working on is the pretty pictures that serve as a backdrop to the conversation, which may or may not actually have anything to do with the pretty pictures.
That's kind of the that's actually kind of the goal. I actually like that. That we're just kind of it's kind of more stream of consciousness conversation while working on our while working on the cartoon and discussing stuff. It doesn't always have to be about Calamity Jane at all. And So far so good, I think on that part. I mean, I'm happy with.
Yeah, and I don't want to like draw this into like a 2 hour long discussion, but you know, and this is I'm not comparing ourselves, but it's just it's something that I do like, and I hope that they do more on Netflix. There's a cartoon called The Midnight Gospel
Okay.
that Pendleton Ward worked on, the guy who created Adventure Time, and
Uh huh.
it's a very interesting cartoon. It's not a kids show.
Okay.
He takes a podcast. Um, as well as a few additional lines of dialogue to provide a little bit of continuity for the cartoon, and then animates what in sometimes feels like a completely unrelated cartoon over top of the dialogue, the interview of the podcast.
Oh, that's cool.
It's great. I really enjoyed it. It was one of the most interesting cartoons I've seen in a really long time, and I hope that they do another season of it because I really thoroughly enjoyed it.
And was that a Netflix exclusive, or did it air someplace else first? Or
To the best of my knowledge, it's a Netflix exclusive.
okay.
Yeah,
Hmm.
but yeah, but it's sort of obviously it's a completely different beast. But I like the idea of because I don't know if you do this, but oftentimes if I'm listening to a podcast, um, it's not really using up all of my brain power.
Yeah, it's
Um,
sort of in the background, right?
yeah, and I end up if I'm not like driving or doing something else while also listening to the podcast, I actually I absorb it less because I get bored and distracted. If I'm just sitting listening to a podcast, I
Hmm.
actually hear it less. I listen to it less.
Huh.
But if I'm listening to a podcast while driving or playing Animal Crossing or, just doing something that's simple, it doesn't have to be much, I tend to listen to it better.
Huh.
I don't know how to explain it. So this works great for me because as with the people who are watching this, I'm watching this too while we're talking.
Yeah. I listen to podcasts quite a bit as I work, and it is kind of like uh, I don't have the technical explanation for it, but your brain your brain doesn't it is there's different functions that your brain does, which is like there's an active state, which is what I'm doing here,
Mm-hmm.
but you are still working on other stuff that you process during the day, or even if there's a conversation happening at the same time that we do. It just comes down to how much your brain in your background, quote unquote, background application, what's going on as it processes stuff versus what you're doing in front of you. Which is which to me explains why you can listen to a podcast and absorb it, because it sort of runs as a background application while all your attention span is focused on with your task at hand.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, when you're listening to the podcast actively as your only thing, your brain is so used to listening to stuff, and I have no, I am completely spitballing stuff here, but your brain is so used to listening to stuff, it takes it for granted. So
Sure.
you're like getting bored. So your brain's like, I need something else to stimuli to keep myself engaged in this, because it's a been there, done that type of thing. But
It
if
seems
you keep
reasonable.
your brain occupied, you start kind of in parallel. I don't know. That's how I work, at least.
It's as good a theory as any. I'm certainly not a neurosurgeon or a neuroscientist, so.
Well, actually, I learned this from there's a woman. I think she's at San Diego University, or her partner's at San Diego University.
Mm-hmm.
Barbara Gruner. She does this thing where there's a technique where, well, she has a class online on Coursera, free advertising for her, called Learning to Learn, and she talks about. And again, I'm using the wrong terms, but she terms she uses exactly how I would approach it. But there's a background application to the way you do things and the way you absorb information. You chunk it and you kind of put it into your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you're done with it, what she was like saying, using the Pomodoro technique, which is where you focus on something for about half an hour, and you just intensely focus on it, and that's it. Then you're done, and you walk away from it. Your brain, even though you're done actively working on it, is still working in the back of your brain on it. And as you're doing other tasks with menial tasks of the day, you come back to it the next day, and you will be better with
Mm-hmm.
it because you process it. But if you sit there and you try to work on it for 8 hours straight, this supposedly it's not as good as whether you take a step away and let your brain relax for a second, because it's like exercise, like anything else.
Right,
So
right, right.
anyway, but
No,
that's a
I buy
completely
that. Yeah,
different.
it makes sense.
It's
Yeah.
not exactly what I expected to be talking about towards the end of our stream, but yeah, it's great. I'll send you a link, or
Yeah,
maybe
no, that sounds really interesting.
we'll put a link in our description tonight too.
Yeah, if we have, yeah, absolutely, happy to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're running a little bit long, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. But it was an interesting conversation. Thanks for sharing with us tonight, James.
And you as well. It was vice versa. It
All
goes both
right.
ways. So
Stay safe, everybody, and we will see you next week. Good night.
good night.